You do not need to remove the flywheel when you remove the clutch, but if you're planning to remove the flywheel, you need to be sure you block the crankshaft and keep it from moving before you remove the flywheel. Before you begin to remove the flywheel, it's absolutely critical that you block the crankshaft and keep it from moving. I use a short 12mm M6 bolt and put it in the bolt head of the rotor bolt, and then attach the front engine cover with its two screws and tighten them by hand. When the cover is tightened up that way, there'll be a small gap at the bottom, and that's your sign that you've blocked the crankshaft and it can't move when you remove the flywheel. Since I don't have an engine stand, and I'm going to be putting a fair amount of force on the engine as I do this removal of the flywheel and the clutch, I don't want it to go anywhere. So I've got a 2x4 up under the front of the engine cover, and I've taken and used some straps to go around my workbench and over the top of the engine. So it's sitting here nice and lashed down to my work table. So hopefully nothing's going to go anywhere as I start taking things apart. Before I take the clutch out, I want to mark it. So I put a mark here on the cover plate, on the pressure plate, and then on the flywheel face, and I marked it with a 1 because I'm kind of paranoid about those marks maybe getting lost at some point. I made a second set as well here with a 2. The reason for this is that those are all balanced, and if you don't put them together in the right sequence, meaning rotation orientation, the engine gets pretty rough. So it's important to go ahead and do that before you remove the clutch. I'm actually going to replace the clutch on this bike, so I'm just showing you this because in many cases, if you're just going to work on those seals to replace them and not replace the clutch, then you'll want to make sure you mark everything as I did, so you'll put it back together exactly the right way. There are 6 bolts that hold the clutch assembly to the flywheel, and on these newer post-81 flywheels and clutches, you can just loosen these and then back them off about a turn at a time all the way around and remove the pressure off of the diaphragm spring safely. On the earlier bikes, which have the solid plate for the clutch and the massive flywheel, you actually have to remove every other bolt, put a bolt in, a special one, and then back the other 3 out, and then carefully remove the pressure on the 3 long bolts to get the clutch off so you don't damage yourself or the engine. But as I say, on these newer clutch designs, all you have to do is crack them loose, and I like to use a little electric impact just to break them free. After I loosen the 6 bolts, I hand tighten them so I can remove them uniformly in a crosswise pattern. And then I'll go around and back them off uniformly around the circle until I get the plate assembly off the bike. Now that I have the 6 bolts loose, I also had to use a screwdriver and carefully pull up a little on this front plate. If you have to pry that plate, you want to be very careful that you don't nick or dent the bell housing. I used a couple of popsicle sticks under the screwdriver to protect it. If you damage the bell housing, the transmission will not mount correctly. And then the whole assembly came loose, and I want to show you how that goes together. This is the diaphragm spring. So you can see that it's a dished unit that fits right into this recess in the flywheel. And then this is the clutch assembly. This is the front where I had made the marks. And you'll notice that this is the raised portion of the friction disc. On the back, it's flush. So when you put a new disc in, you want to make sure you get that orientation. You'll notice also that the back of the pressure plate has a set of ears on it, but the front of the pressure plate just shows these ribs, and it's basically smooth. So that's how it all goes together. The pressure plate sits on a set of locating pins, so you can pull it off and separate it and get the friction disc out of the clutch. So that's the friction disc, and then these are the two plates that go together with this locating pin right here.